Hey, how's it going? Welcome to expression lesson number 7, where we look at my favorite expression card, come to terms. I love this with the girl meditating here. And this is a great expression. It really is. And so we'll take a look at it to understand it and to internalize it. So here we go. So remember in the story of Walt Disney, the contract reduction, right? They said it was a shock for Murphy. He had to come to terms with the fact that he was not in control. So let's think about the context, right? The expression in context. It was a shock for Murphy. He had to come to terms with the fact that he wasn't in control. So you're coming to terms with a fact. What's the fact? He's not in control anymore. So it's like a realization, right? Is that what we're saying here? Is come to terms like a realization? Well, if you look at it, that's in a way what it is. You're learning to accept something difficult. What's a word that you know similar to this? To let go, to surrender, to agree, to acknowledge, right? To say, okay, yeah, I see it. You learn to accept something difficult. Now look at this. It's number 13, extremely common. Come to terms. And it has a strong business connection. Let's take a look here in the examples. Japan must come to terms with the fact that their economy is not doing well, right? So we have he's still coming to terms with the reality of his mother's death or whatever that is. Once she finally came to terms with the idea, she was nicer to the people around her. So a lot of these, because come to terms with is really long, we don't get the full example. But the important part here is the collocations, right? What are the words that go with this expression? Notice this is a good one because you must come to terms. So in other words, it's like an obligation. And most of the time, that's where we find this expression. You come to terms with something that you cannot change, right? It's something difficult. And that's why we see these words like the fact, the reality, right? Because you come to terms with something typically that cannot change, something difficult. So these are the two most common words. Again, if you think about how do I use this word, this expression, these are the most common combinations. You come to terms with a fact, come to terms with reality, come to terms with an idea, right? And this on the same side, the words on the left support the same type of hypothesis, right? That you must come to terms. He's still coming to terms. She finally came to terms, showing that there's difficulty with it. So now that we really understand the word, let's think about, well, where did this come from? This is so important if you want to really learn an expression, is to understand the logic of the expression. And then it's so much easier to remember. So when we say term, it comes from the Latin term terminus, right? And terminus, as you probably know, terminal, like an airport, is a limit. It's a boundary. It's the edge of something, right? The final limit. There's no more, right? So you see that there's no more options. When you come to terms, in other words, you arrive at the end of something. There's no more space. There's no more option. It's over. You have come to terms. There's no more thinking about it. It's final. So now that we understand the expression, let's take a look at some examples. Here is from a business, the same one we have on our card, actually. Japan is struggling to come to terms with a banking system overflowing with hundreds of billions of dollars in debt, right? You see here struggling, that word coming up again and again. It's fighting. It's a difficult fight. They are struggling to come to terms. They're struggling to accept, to think about how to deal with something. Academic article 2000, using cultural models, people can come to terms with complex situations quickly, correctly making the right choice. So again, we see this idea of a model helping us to see reality, right? Come to terms with a situation, come to terms with an idea, a reality, a fact, or to come to terms with a complex situation. Finally, academic article 2001, it won't be easy for the Palestinians to come to terms with Israelis' need to live within fixed boundaries. So we can see that there's a type of authority and power, and there's one side that needs to accept a hard reality. So over and over, we see that this is used in those difficult situations. So we saw it in the key examples. Let's see it in culture with music. This is Carolina Liar, Coming to Terms. Okay, so look at the words here. I'm coming to terms. I'm starting to learn. This is not all. It's cracked up means expected, or that we believe it should be, right? I'm starting to learn. This is not all it's expected or cracked up to be. Because I'm using you, you're using me, it's never as easy as we believe. So don't worry too much about the words and the intricacy. Just hold on to the idea. I'm coming to terms. I'm starting to learn. And that's the idea, right? When you're coming to terms, it means that you're starting to learn something. You're accepting something. Look at this meme. Not sure if I'm going through depression or just coming to terms with adult life. Remember, we talked about learning. You're learning something like, wow, I have more responsibility, less freedom. We have to learn to accept, to come to terms with the idea that life is not going to get easier. And that's the idea of this meme. You have to come to terms with adult life, as he says. Finally, in movies, this is a closing keynote, Salman Khan, Education Reimagined.
As a real thing. And anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit, you almost have to start with that delusional optimism, where you just assume that, okay, this makes a lot of sense, the social return on investment here is through the roof, surely someone will fund it. But you quickly come to terms with reality. You have meetings.
Okay, so he's talking about an investment situation. You need to be optimistic and say, oh yeah, this is great. But then you have to come to terms with reality. Here's that key word we saw, come to terms with reality. Again, if you want to continue watching this video, just click on the link in the resources. I hope you enjoyed this expression, to come to terms, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.